If you would, just allow yourself to be fully present. Allow the chair to lovingly support you. And breathe. Feel that breath of God breathing life in and through you now. Release and let go. Become fully present. As you direct the attention of your mind into your heart. And if it helps, place your hand on your heart. Feel the beating of life. The pulsation of the universe. Living as this individuated soul. This one that is you. Unique in all the universe. Unique in your gifts, in your talents, in your ways of being and of doing. You are a precious light, here to shine forth as only you can. Take another deep, loving breath. The sweet breath of spirit, filling you with life, filling you with hope, with comfort, with peace. We invite you to rest in a moment of silence and serenity. Loving God, we know you work in mysterious ways. And so often we don't know and we don't understand. Jesus said, in all things, give thanks. We give thanks that you know. We give thanks that you are in charge of the universe. We give thanks that you work miracles in and through our lives every day. We give thanks for healing in mind, heart, body, and spirit. We give thanks for the opportunity to be transformed and to be transformers. For we know that each of us is called. We are called by you to be the light. You are the light of the world. Let your light shine. Allow that light to radiate in and through your mind and your thoughts, through your heart, through all your feelings, to unfold you and bless you in whatever ways that may be needed. And allow that light and love to flow in and through your body. And if there is any area that feels discomfort, if there is any challenge whatsoever, allow that light to infill you in this moment. Sweet Spirit, we are truly grateful that we are here on this dynamic planet. And we have come here to learn, to grow, and to be our divine selves. And so it is. Breathe. Deep breath. Breathing is good, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Anyone ever had pneumonia? Lord knows we've all had either allergies or sinuses, especially lately. I love Arizona, but it's one of the quirks that we get to deal with here too. So breathing is a good thing, and I'm very grateful for it, and I'm grateful to be here. I want to start out the lesson with a story. I don't know about you, but I love stories. And this is one I heard many, many years ago, and it's one of my favorites. Having had the opportunity and the blessing to grow up on a wildlife refuge when I was a kid, this one really spoke to me. Because it was about a conservationist. And he was out driving along this country road, and there was this farmhouse off to the side, and he drove by, and the dust is flying up behind him and stuff, and he's enjoying the beautiful sunny day, and all of a sudden he slams on his brakes because he caught something out of the corner of his eye and he thought, that can't be right. And he'd been a conservationist for over 30 years, and he'd seen a lot of stuff in his day. He traveled all over the country, including Alaska and Yukon. But here it was in this little Midwestern farm country. Put it in reverse, backed up, pulled it into the farmer's driveway and courtyard area, went over the cattle guard, gets out, farmer's over there by the barn, he comes walking up to him, introduces himself. Farmer sees a sign on his truck and shakes his hand. He says, mighty glad to meet you. And he said, sir, can we walk over to your chicken coop a minute? He says, you bet. Is that what I think that is? I said, yes, sir. Been there for over a year now. I said, sir, do you know it is illegal to keep an eagle in captivity? He said, yes, sir, I have tried my darndest to get rid of this thing, and he won't leave. And he said, well, how could you have an eagle in your chicken coop? And there was the eagle, and he was just, scratching and pecking, just, with the rest of the chickens. And he said, I've seen a lot of things in my day, but he says, this beats them all. He says, well, come on in the house, have a cup of coffee, and I'll tell you the story. So they did. They go in, and the farmer's wife comes in, she brings him a cup of coffee, and he says, well, I was out riding, checking fences and stuff one day, and I decided to ride over to the edge of the cliffs. And I thought I heard something, and I looked down, and here was this big nest. And there was this little poof ball of downy feathers and stuff, and this squawking baby bird. And it was all by itself. Now I know that if you mess with the baby bird, a lot of times the mama won't come back or won't feed it again or something. So I left it alone, but he kept riding back every day. And on the third day, he realized it had been abandoned, and if he didn't do something, he was going to die. So he had come prepared. He had a rope. And being the good horse that his horse was, he told him to stay, and he tied the rope to the saddle horn. He lowered himself down, got the baby bird, had a big gunny sack, put part of the nest in it and everything, took it home, and thought, well, it's a bird. What do I do with it? He goes, I raise cattle, chickens, we've done just about everything. But he says, I'm not even sure what kind of bird this was. He thought it might be an eagle, but he wasn't sure. He'd never seen one before as a baby. So he goes, well, chickens are birds. So we put the eaglet in with the chickens, and they adopted him. And so, as children do, the eaglet took up the behaviors of the chickens. Now this caused the conservationists a bit of just pause for reflection, let's say, because it was mind-boggling. But he knew he had to do something about it. And he says, well, have you tried to get him to go? He said, oh yeah. He says, I have, my neighbors have, my wife have, we all have. And he seems to be content to just be in there with the chickens. And he goes, well, you haven't flipped his wings or anything, have you? He says, no, he's perfectly capable of flying. Although he doesn't seem to know he is. He goes, well, maybe he just needs some encouragement, you know? So the conservationist asked the farmer if he had a ladder. He says, oh, sure, you bet. He goes, I got all kinds of ladders. So he goes, well, give me a pretty good sized one. And he said, well, can I get up by him? He goes, oh, sure. He's just like the chickens. You can just walk right up and grab him. He's like, okay. So he had some big, heavy leather gloves. And he put them on, and with the farmer's help, he put the eagle up on the conservationist's arm, and he walks up the ladder, and he talks to him. And he's talking to him. He goes, you are a mighty eagle. You are meant to fly. Fly free. You know, and he's knowing with this pep talk that this eagle is going to fly. And the eagle kind of looks at him, and he hops down on the ground and walks back over to the chicken coop. Well, this goes on. The farmer invites the conservationist to stay with him. So he's been staying there, and then he has to move on to his next job. So he's going back and forth. And each time he goes up a little higher. So one of the times he's like, all right, he says, would it be okay if I got up on top of your barn? He goes, you know, that's about 35, 40 feet, don't you? He's like, it's okay, I climb mountains, I can do this. So he does. Same thing again. Except for this time, he slides down to the edge of the roof. It looks like he's going, you know, inner tubing or something. Slides down to the edge of the roof of the barn, hops down on the ground, walks back over to the chicken coop. By now, he is dumbfounded. He's thinking, there's got to be something. There's got to be. And then he wakes up in the middle of the night, the very next night, and goes, I got it. He said, would you take me back to that place by the cliff where you found his nest? He said, oh, sure. He says, I remember right where it is. So they got in the pickup, took him out there. And there stands the farmer and the conservationist, full of hope and faith. And once again, he puts the eagle up on his arm, and he's giving him this great pep talk, going, you are a mighty eagle. You are born to fly and soar. Be free. Eagle looks at him. It's like, man, I've heard this before. But then something catches the eagle's attention. And he starts looking out over the valley. And he starts surveying all the land. And about that time, an updraft comes up from the valley below. Guess what he does? He spreads his sweet wings. And he flies. Now, let's make this a little more personal. Have you ever felt like you were in the chicken coop? Are you now? No. No? Some of us aren't, some of us are, some of us aren't sure. And that's okay too. Myrtle Fillmore was in her own version of a chicken coop, so to speak. It was called tuberculosis. And I was particularly glad that I got to speak here in August because both Charles and Myrtle Fillmore were born in the month of August. So this is a great time to celebrate their tradition, their wisdom, their faith. You know, the song that we were singing, I think, is so poignant for what so many are going through. not just in this room, but in this world. Everywhere you look, there is some flavor of challenge. You never know when you're driving down the street and it finds you. Or just going into a grocery store. Or maybe you go to the dentist or the doctor and you find out you have one other challenge that you never even knew existed. Well, Myrtle had been told since the time she was a tiny little girl that she was frail, she was weak, she had tuberculosis, and she could expect to die young. Great way to grow up, huh? I don't think so. Well, when she was 41, here she was, happily married with 2 children, a woman of steadfast faith. She had grown up in the Methodist Church. She had this very personal relationship with God. Jesus was her best friend, and she would set a chair when she would pray for Jesus because she knew he was there with her. Now, she just did not believe the doctor's report that it was her time to go. The good news is, what is that we say? God is no respecter of persons, or their inflated opinions. People don't know it all, but God does. And Myrtle knew in her heart and soul it was not her time, that she had other work to do. And if it wasn't for her faith, we would not be here today together. Right. Unity would not exist. Thank God for the strength and the stubborn faith of one woman, huh? Amen to that. So she went in search of, and I relate to Myrtle because I've always been one of those. They said, I was told I couldn't have children for 10 years. It was biologically impossible. Well, I have 2. And I had both of them. And I now have grandchildren. I was told so many times, like, you can't. It's like, oh yeah, tell me I can't. Go for it. What do you want to tell me I can't? We'll see about that. Well, that's the spirit that was in Myrtle, except this was in the 1800s. That was tough. And there wasn't a whole lot of science or medical help. But she knew in her heart. And so she went to that lecture by Dr. E.B. Weeks. And she heard those words, you are a child of God, and therefore you do not inherit sickness or disease. Your inheritance is life. And that's what I have to remind myself. Because I've had some interesting reports from doctors before too, and it's like, you know what? Thanks for sharing. But I'm going to get God's opinion. Because God knows better, and God sees the bigger picture. Well, you know what? 2.5 years later, the doctor, she was given 6 months to get her affairs in order, right? 2.5 years later, after she had taken this message to heart, the doctors examined her again. They couldn't even find a trace that she'd ever had tuberculosis. And that was only one of her problems. Just one. It's amazing what faith can do in and through us as we believe, as we affirm the truth. It can set us free from anything and everything imaginable. And sometimes, no, it may not give us the winning lottery tickets. It may not make a woman who's 5'4" be 5'8", which was my desire. I wanted to be 5'8" like my mom, and it was like, okay, with God all things are possible. At 61, do you think I'm going to grow another 4 inches? Probably not. I'm guessing. Just probably not. But she started praying with people in her living room, in what they called a parlor then. And other people began to have feelings. Charles started really paying attention. He was more the scientifically minded. He was sort of the left brain and she was the right brain. And they were a perfect pairing. So, it touched him so deeply that in 1889, he decided to quit his day job and dedicate his entire life and time to the study and further blessings in sharing with others of spiritual truth. And thank heavens he did. He got on board. And he went through his own healing. Remember, if you know their story, he had had his leg crippled as a child in an accident. His leg literally grew when he was, in his 60s or something, I think it was. It was amazing. There is nothing impossible for God. And when we're willing to allow Spirit to work in and through us, miracles do happen. Miracles can literally become the norm. One of the other blessings that I love about Myrtle, silent unity, which I dearly love. I got to spend time there when I was at Unity Village for a couple of years and worked in the telephone prayer room. Myrtle started silent unity at her house with her home phone, and she was it. Touches the lives of millions of people every year now. How blessed. One woman with one challenge. You talk about lemonade out of lemons. She is the quintessential example. And then, to further expand unity, do you know how we became a worldwide ministry? This was thanks to Charles. He was the entrepreneur. He had the insights. Myrtle was the heart. She was the heart and soul. He got so many of his ideas from her, and then he took the ball and ran with them. He took it into the inside. In 1922, he bought a radio station. And he would stay up all night sometimes. And he would give talks on the teachings of what was evolving into unity and as unity. And at that time of night, those radio waves could bounce around the world, literally. That's how unity became known in places like Europe, Africa, Australia. He started it with this little radio station. It was W.O.Q. You know, it's in our greatest challenges that we usually embrace the closer walk with God, isn't it? I mean, how often, if you're just having a really fun, upbeat day, do you really thank you, God? Thank you, God, thank you, God, thank you, God. You know, one of the things, sometimes when I call my son or my daughter because they don't live in the area, and I'll say, how are you doing? It's like, oh, just, nothing special. And I said, thank God. Thank God for ordinary days. When we don't have catastrophes happen, when we don't have forest fires going on, when we don't have horrific events like in Egypt and Afghanistan and other places. Thank God the baby is asleep in their crib in the other room. Thank you, God. This is what Charles and Myrtle knew. And they saw how Spirit could work in and through their being. In and through their minds, their hearts, their bodies, their soul, and their finances. So let me ask you this. Is there any part of your life that you leave God out of?
That is good.
Any answers? Anyone honest enough to share? How many of us think that God doesn't get involved in finances? Money just isn't part of God's gig. Not true. Do you know what unity started with? 1 penny. 1 penny. When they had the vision of Unity Village and of evolving the unity movement, because people kept pushing him to become more, because they saw the need and the hunger in the world for what they had to offer. somebody threw a penny on the table as a smart aleck comment and a remark, and it's like, oh, here, start it with this, and Myrtle said, we will. She said, that's seed money, and is with faith. And by the grace of God, we will. So where are we now? Not too shabby, huh? There is something, well, there's a lot of things I've learned from Myrtle. She has been my personal mentor over the years. She's the one that got me into unity, got me into being a unity minister, and so much more. She has walked with me through my own healings. And there's something that she taught me a long time ago, and I'd forgotten about it, and it came back to me the other day that I want to share with you, and it's the 1, 2, 3. Pray, listen, follow through. And she gave it to me in a waltz tempo, which I thought was kind of fun. Because I love to waltz. I think it's just, I could just see myself in Austria, in one of the grand palaces doing a waltz in a great ball gown or something, and I could just see this, and she was almost singing this to me. It's pray, listen, follow through. Pray, listen, follow through. Ask, listen, and follow through. God can't give us an answer if we don't ask him. He, she, it. We need another name for God. I think that's one of the things. God is both masculine and feminine, and neither. And I guess that's why a lot of times they use the word spirit. So if anybody has any ideas, let me know. Email me or something. One of the things that did come to mind for me too are the antidotes. When we forget, because for me, life has been a journey of remembering and forgetting. That's the kicker, isn't it? We forget. It's like forgetting to take, what is it, ginkgo, because it helps your memory. It's like, wait, what was it? Ginseng, ginkgo, no, it starts with a G. The remembering part. So, when we forget, how can we remember? How can we remember the truth that we are the beloved of God? We are here on a spiritual journey. Our souls have incarnated to earth school. And we are about the spiritual education. When we forget, do something to remind yourselves. Maybe it's a color. Maybe it's like these red roses. There was something Spirit gave me. I'm a painter. And so this was a gift Spirit gave me. And it looks like just a nice little picture of 2 yellow flowers. The title of it is Divine Partnership. And I thought, oh, cool, I get it. God and I are partners. But then I also started looking, it's like, okay, so which one is God and which one is me? Right. And God said yes. And I said, guess what? Just yes. It's like, okay, this one's me, this one's you. It's like, yes. It's like, or that one's me and that one's you. It's like, yes. Pardon the expression, we are one, which is an oxymoron of sorts. It's like, there is no we. There is only one. As I always crack me up, we are one. This was the message I got in this painting. That as Myrtle knew, as the eagle knew, and came to realize our potential and the truth of who and what we are as spiritual beings. I want to invite you to just close your eyes for just a moment. This is from a Native American story. I want you to picture 2 wolves, and they have a name tag. One wolf is named love. The other wolf is named fear. And the Great Spirit comes up to you and asks you, my beloved, which will you feed? In the challenges of their lives, of mind, heart, body, and soul, we give grateful thanks that healing takes all forms. We give thanks for the light, the love, the grace, the comfort, the discernment, as we choose to feed love. We choose to feed our hearts, as well as our minds, bodies, and souls. And so we say thank you. Thank you, God. And so it is. Amen. Today's message was titled, With God All Things Are Possible. And this is what I ask you to remember. I've written it on my mirror before in lipstick and magic marker. I've written it all kinds of places. Whatever it takes, do it. And remember, you are precious in God's sight and honored and loved now and forever. Thank you for being here, and thank you for being a part of this dynamic, magnificent, wonderful, worldwide movement that we call unity. God bless you all.